Find the value of each trigonometric ratio from the smallest acute angle to the nearest thousandth. So do I have all of the information?
No.
I do not. I mean, not yet. So what do I need to know before I find sine, cosine, and tangent?
AC.
AC, which is the hypotenuse. So I'm going to do a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So the hypotenuse is missing. Which letter is that going to be? C. You can call it C still, or you can call it X. It doesn't really matter. We don't know it. And then 48 squared plus 14 squared. If you have a scientific calculator, you can actually type in that whole statement. 48 squared plus 14 squared, and it'll tell you the answer. $2,500 equals x squared. Take the square root, and that missing side is 50. So go ahead and label it 50. All right, so we want to label the sides, but in order to do that, we need to know which is the smallest acute angle. Where is the smallest acute angle going to be located? Across from 14, the shortest side, which is angle C. So the smallest angle is always across from the shortest side. So when we say sine, what do I have to write directly after sine? C. And the same thing for cosine of C. And then tangent of C. It's going to look like a decimal rounded to the nearest thousandth. How many zeros are in 1,000? 3. So we're going to go 3 places. All right, so starting with sine, we learned an acronym. It was Sohcahtoa. So for so, what will go in the numerator is the opposite. What is opposite of C? 14, which means 48 is adjacent, and 50 is still the hypotenuse. So we should have opposite, which is 14, over the hypotenuse, which is 50. I don't really need to reduce it because it just asks for the decimal rounded to the thousandth. So what is 14 over 50 as a decimal?
0.28.
0.28. And then you could put a 0 at the end if you want. It doesn't have to be there. So that's so. And then cosine. How do you spell ca? C-A-H. So what will go in the numerator? 48. And then in the denominator, 50, which makes 0.96. And then again, you could put a 0 at the end if you want. Last, we have Sohcahtoa and then Toa. So opposite will go in the numerator, which is still 14. Adjacent in the denominator, which is 48. 14 divided by 48 is point. Correct. So this is your answer right here. Sine of C equals 0.28. Cosine of C equals 0.96. Tangent of C equals 0.292. Questions on a problem like this? Okay, beautiful. We're also going to review what we did yesterday. We're going to use tangent to solve for the value of x. Why can I not use the Pythagorean theorem on this problem? Because I have one side and an angle. Can I plug an angle into the Pythagorean theorem? No. So I know it says tangent, but you still want to label the sides from the angle you're given. So from 20, what kind of side is 10? Opposite. And then what kind of side is x? Adjacent. So which trig function deals with opposite and adjacent? Tangent. Yeah. Tangent from what angle? 20 equals the opposite over the adjacent. So it'll be 10 over x. Can I just multiply both sides by 10? No, that will not cancel out your fraction. So what do we need to do? Flip them. You're going to flip both sides. So on the left you have 1 over tangent of 20. On the right you have x over 10 times 10 on both sides. So you're going to type this in. Remember that it will tell you error if you don't close this parenthesis in your calculator. You gotta have to divide it. See right there. So we're gonna insert. All right, what did everyone get rounded to the nearest tenth? 27.5. 0.5. So 10 obviously has 1 0, so 1 decimal place. 27.5. Did anybody not get that in their calculator? Okay. We're going to go to the second page. You have a shark on your smartwatch?
Yes.
When I looked, it was funny. Anyways, we're going to go back to a lot of this section. We're just going to keep going with what we were learning yesterday. So the top portion of page 2 we'll get back to tomorrow. We're going to start at the bottom of page 2, which looks like this. We're going to find the values of u and t using sine and cosine. Round your answers to the nearest tenth. So it's going to be the same process. The first thing you want to do is label the given sides as opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse. Okay? So which of these is the opposite? T is opposite because we're talking from 65. Which of these is the hypotenuse? 8, which means adjacent is u. All right, so the second thing we're going to do, this is slightly different because we have all of the sides labeled. But what we're going to do is to decide which trig ratio to use. We're either going to use sine, cosine, or tangent. Remember that we only want one variable in the equation. So yesterday, we learned about tangent, right? Tangent is opposite and adjacent. Would it be helpful to use tangent if I don't know the opposite and I don't know the adjacent? No. So what you're going to do is you want one side you don't know and one side that you do know. So we're going to use the side we don't know. We'll start with t, because why not? One side we don't know, and then one side we do know. And we'll pick which trig ratio to use based on that. So your options are so, which is sine, ca, which is cosine, or toa. Which one deals with the opposite and the hypotenuse? So, which is sine. So we're going to set up sine from what angle? 65. And it will equal the opposite, which is t, over the hypotenuse, which is 8. Can I multiply both sides by 8?
Yeah.
Yes. So go ahead and multiply, and then you just type it into your calculator. Make sure you type in sine and not tangent. You will get a very different answer. So 8 times sine of 65, and then enter. We're going to round to the 10th. What did we get? 7.3. Did anybody not get 7.3? Perfect. All right, so from here, we need to find the other side. Here's what I don't recommend. I don't recommend using the side we just found, because you could be wrong. I know we're right in this case, but you could be wrong on your test, your quiz, your whatever. Also, number 2, was 7.3 the exact answer that you got? No, you rounded. You don't want to use a rounded answer in the middle of a problem. Okay, so we still want to use the side we know about. I know that this is 8. No matter what, no matter how terrible I did at this first part, this is 8. So I still want to use 8, and I'm going to use the side I don't know. Okay? So which trig ratio deals with those two sides? Cosine. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So we're going to start with cosine. From what angle? 65 equals the adjacent, which is u, over the hypotenuse, which is 8. Can I multiply both sides times 8?
Yes.
I can. So 8 times cosine of 65. What did we get? 3.4. Did anybody not get 3.4? Perfect. So now we just practice. From here on out, it won't normally tell you use sine or cosine or tangent. You just have to figure it out using these steps. Label your sides, and then pick two sides and the trig ratio that goes with them. Okay? So keep practicing it on the next page. Find the values of x and y using sine and cosine. So we're going to label the sides from 35 degrees. Which of these is the hypotenuse? 53. Which of these is opposite? X, which means my adjacent is y. I'm going to tell you the hardest part of this particular problem is the fact that these numbers are like switched, like 53 and 35. So be careful when you're typing them in a minute, because people they make those mistakes. So we want to pick a side we do know. We know 53. We want to pick a side we don't know. So pick one of the sides to figure out. Opposite x. Sounds good? So which trig ratio deals with these two sides? Sine. So sine from what angle? 35 equals the opposite, which is x, over the hypotenuse, 53. We can multiply both sides by 53. So again, just be careful when you type in. It's 53 times sine of 35. What did we get? 30.4. Did anybody not get 30.4? Beautiful. All right, we're going to do this again. But this time we want to solve for y. And again, you want to use the side you know, which is 53, and y, which we don't know. Which trig ratio deals with these two sides? Cosine from 35 equals the adjacent, which is y, over the hypotenuse, 53. Multiply both sides times 53. What is 53 times cosine of 35? 43.4. Did anybody not get that? Okay. You want to make sure your answers make sense. Which of these should be the longest side? Hypotenuse. Which of them should be like the medium side? Y. So it should be between, the lengths of the smaller side and then the hypotenuse. All right. Before we move on to the last question, you need to know this term. Right now, you have pictures attached to it. Eventually, we're going to have word problems where there's no picture and you'll have to draw one. But you'll see the words angle of elevation and angle of depression. When you think of elevation, what direction do you think of? Up. And then depression, if you had to think of a direction, down. That's not a happy thing to be depressed. So there is a man here and a woman, female, whatever here. An angle of depression, if you notice, there's a horizontal line and an angle opening downward. Essentially, anytime you look down at an object, that is an angle of depression. And then from her, there's a horizontal line and an angle opening upward. Anytime you look up to an object, that's an angle of elevation. So you will see these words. For now, they're in pictures, but eventually you'll have to draw a picture, and we'll go over it again. Okay? So in our particular problem, we're going to talk about a ski slope. A ski slope is meant to go downward, so we're going to talk about angle of depression here. If you're skiing down a mountain with an altitude of 1,200 feet, what does altitude mean? A height of 1,200 feet. The angle of depression is 21 degrees. So angle of depression, again, from a horizontal line, it's an angle going downward. We're going to find the distance you ski down the mountain to the nearest foot. So what is my answer going to look like if it's to the nearest foot? A whole number, so keep that in mind. So we can't use the Pythagorean theorem, so we have to use a trig ratio. We got an angle here. You can put it in the box. So from 21 degrees, which is the angle they gave us, we're looking at this triangle here. Okay, I outlined it, in blue. From 21 degrees, they gave us 1,200. What kind of side is 1,200? Opposite. And then what kind of side is x? Hypotenuse. So we have to decide which trig ratio we will use if we're dealing with these two sides. Sine. I agree. Sine from 21 degrees equals the opposite, which is 1200, over the hypotenuse, which is x. Can I multiply both sides by 1200 right now? I cannot. I need to flip both sides. So 1 over sine of 21 is equal to x over 1200. Now I can multiply both sides by 1200. We are finding the length of a hypotenuse, which will be larger than any of the sides, so it's going to be a big number. Type in 1200 times 1 over sine of 21. Make sure you're closing that parenthesis when you type in 21. What do we get rounded to the nearest foot? 3,300? I think it's 49 feet.